Hello, everyone, and welcome to the annual Reverend Dr. Benjamin E. Mays Martin Luther King Jr. Day Debate. My name is Sammy Ripito, and I am the Director of Debate and a visiting assistant professor in the Rhetoric and Screen Studies, Film and Screen Studies Department here at Bates. And I am so happy to see you all here. After a full day of learning and exploring the intricacies and nuances of food justice, I am hopeful that you all have been inspired to continue the intellectual work of thinking through solutions to problems that often feel too big to address. For today, our debate will revolve around the hungry, the disenfranchised, and the power to control food access. Before we begin to think through how we resist oppressive regimes of power, I'd like to thank our guests from Morehouse, debaters Dalton Favors and Jonathan Dulcie, and their coach Nicholas Bacon. Big round of applause. It is no small thing to make it to cold Lewiston, Maine from Atlanta, Georgia in this amazing weather and do us the honor of debating with us. What I will say is that when I first accepted this position in August of this year, the Reverend Dr. Benjamin E. Mays debate, an event meant to represent MLK's mentor and friend who attended Bates College and then served as president at Morehouse for 3 decades, and the event is meant to uphold the debating and oratory legacy that he left behind. This debate was emphasized as one of the most important tasks I would perform for the Bates community in my new position. And now, having worked to put together this event, it's not hard to see why. What the Bates and Morehouse debate represents is a commitment to the ideals and dedicational follow-through of Dr. Mays to explore, assess, and defend good ideas through the processes of deliberation and debate. That being willing to engage with those that have different viewpoints than ourselves is one of the most powerful tools we have in defending the practices of democracy and the rights of everyone. Though debate is now often framed as an impasse, an inability to come to a conclusion, I would argue and urge that you think of debate as instead a rigorous testing of ideas, of having the courtesy to prepare your best arguments for your opponent, so that way we might all discover some truth at the end of a glorious sparring of ideas and words. To use such a process to become better activists and community members as we organize to resist oppression, injustice, and systemic racism. Our debate focuses on one area where the three, oppression, injustice, and systemic racism, come together. According to the Food Research and Action Center in 2022, 1 in 8 households in the United States experience food insecurity. This number is overly represented by Black and Latinx households who represent 43% of those households. And though there are many factors that make that statistic possible, including poverty, lack of health and nutrient food access, one element that exacerbates the problem is that there is no protected right in the United States to grow one's own food. So, in the face of starvation, of the inability to attain the most basic needs to make ours and those in our communities' bodies and minds functions, of city, state, and federal ordinances that create, maintain, and perpetuate food apartheid or the systemic segregation of food access along race and class lines, how do we resist? How do we obtain food justice for ourselves and our communities? These large questions bring us to the resolution being debated today. This House believes that illegal community farms are a just response to food deserts. This resolution will be debated by 4 incredible debaters, all of which have been assigned to their side and have been asked to represent the best arguments possible for it. Affirming the resolution And speaking first is Dalton. Speaking second is Tosca. And negating the resolution, speaking first is Jonathan, and speaking second is Ricky. You'll notice there's a Morehouse debater and a Bates debater on each side today. The debate will proceed in the following format. Beginning with the affirmative, these fine folks over here. Each speaker will give a 7-minute speech outlining their case and engaging with the other side's arguments. After the 4 constructive speeches have concluded, I will return to take questions from the audience for 10 minutes. So think carefully as the debate goes on if there is something important you feel has not been addressed or you would like clarity or expansion on. Once those 10 minutes are up, each team will give a 1-minute or a 5-minute rebuttal to summarize the best arguments for their side. Once the debate is over, we will give our debaters a big round of applause, and I would ask you to use the QR code that is posted around the room to vote for the side you think won the debate. Remember, to be a good judge is not about voting for the side that you inherently believe in, so what you walked in agreeing with. Rather, you are being tasked to vote for who made the most compelling case for their side. After the voting is closed, the results will be posted on the Brooks Quimby Debate Council's Instagram, which is on those flyers, but it's at Bates Debate BQDC on Instagram. One final reminder is while you should engage with the debate by listening carefully, snapping at points you find compelling, and making faces when appropriate, please hold your comments until the question and answer period or until after the debate, when I'm sure any of our debaters would be happy to engage in a respectful conversation with you about the ideas shared here. Thank you again for coming to this event. I now welcome the first affirmative speaker to give a speech no longer than 7 minutes. Hear, hear.
Big crowd, everyone. I'm a little nervous. Nice to meet you all. Hello, everyone. My name is Dalton Favors. I'm going to be presenting the first affirmative speaker. I'm a student from Morehouse College, and before we start, I'd like to thank both my partner and my partner from Morehouse, of course, the coaches of both teams, and Bates for extending us this wonderful opportunity to engage in an educational discussion. I'm going to begin my 7 minutes now. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. And that is Martin Luther King. The debate that we are having today is that on food apartheid, food insecurity that many people face today. Let's start with the facts before we talk about what the debate that we're having today is truly about. Today in the United States, 54 million people live in food insecure areas, and 23.5 million live in explicit food deserts. That means that 1 in 6 people in this country are struggling to find their next meal. This is a massive injustice that so many people face every day, and today's debate is about how we can center them and their needs. What we believe on the affirmative side of today's case is the model of community farms, a form of mutual aid that puts production back in the hands of civilians by allowing the community to access land to grow fresh produce. This land is tilled as a communal service, which is volunteer-based with the aim of providing people with fresh produce, either for free or by selling their produce for distribution. Now, this is not a pie-in-the-sky model. This is something that we see all over the country. It's Spiral Gardens in Berkeley, California, the Urban Growers Collective in Chicago, Gangsters to Growers in Atlanta, among many others. And while these are what community farms look like in the status quo, we should also note, for the purpose of today's debate, this is the type of illegality that we may see maybe due to zoning legislation or improper lack of what is going to be sold, as well as use of pesticides. For this, we believe that these communal farms, even if they are illegal, are just for 3 reasons. The first being to put an end to explicit food apartheid that happen all over this country. The second being to galvanize community organizing in this country. And the third being to foster community revitalization. Starting with the first, what are the harms that we see every day? We see that food apartheid produces diverging outcomes on the same axes of inequality that we see all too often across this country. Moreland et al. From 2002 finds that not only do black neighborhoods receive 1/4 of the supermarkets that white communities do, we also see that poor communities have 3 times the establishments that serve alcohol. This information cannot be surprising to us because we see that there is a precarity to access to adequate, healthy food, which means that people have to resort often to cheap, unhealthy food, which may be high in sodium, fats, and salts. We see the health impacts of this are of the inability to access healthy foods, mean that low-income populations often suffer from higher rates of diabetes, as well as obesity and heart disease, which Gallagher 2006 finds. What all this means is that that cardiovascular diseases, which are often caused by this, by having to resort to unhealthy foods, kill 2 million people each year. What that means is that our poorest and most manipulated population in this country are the people that are dying the most because they cannot access healthy foods. What can we do about this? We believe that food deserts are one in a resource of many different options. However, when these options are illegal, we believe that the benefits vastly outweigh whatever harms could be possible. We see that this will decrease the cost of food. By having a volunteer-based service, this decreases the cost of labor, which means that you can sell these produce back to the community or distribute them for free and provide a vital resource to people that truly need it. We also see that, that this will, by having this healthy food, means that people will be able to use this food and not have to resort to unhealthy food and therefore feel the brunt of the adverse health effects that is found in the status quo in food deserts. With that being said, we should also move on to the second reason, the fact that we will see galvanizing from community organizations. We see that America is currently having a recreational crisis. We are lacking vital community centers that bring people together. And we see that community centers and these community farms can be a vital resource in order to revitalize our communities. The American Enterprise Institute finds that Americans who live in closer proximity to community centers such as parks and libraries, they feel closer to each other, right? They also feel that they will be more likely to help each other in their community. However, we should note, when you live in a food desert, which also is usually in an area where that does not have the tax revenue and the resources to build these communities and to build these community centers, you will not have access to those vital resources. As a result, we see that community farms will be able to, even if illegal, will be able to provide a Band-Aid solution, one that is vitally necessary to provide community organizing. Kingsley and Townsend, 2006, finds that urban farms increase social support as well as social connection to other people in the community. We can also, however, note the fact that community organizing is a mutual aid action, one that we must look to the historical lineage of the Black Panther Party in spearheading. We see that the Black Panthers had organizations such as free grocery giveaways, as well as free breakfast, which allowed people to have access to the meals that they so desperately needed. Community farms not only will provide people the access to community that they want and need, which will revitalize their communities, it will also provide people access to having healthy food. With that being said, we see even if there is some illegality to these to these vital needs and community farming actions, the benefits that we see vastly outweigh whatever harms the negative might tell you. The negative wants to say that the use of pesticides is worth people starving. What the affirmative tells you is that is absolutely not the case, and for that reason, we must support the use of community gardens and farms in people's communities. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Wow, it's a packed room. First off, I'd like to thank Bates College for having us. It's been truly a pleasure getting to know your students, your faculty, your president. I'd like to thank my coach for bringing us. I'd like to thank my debate partner, Dalton. I'd also like to thank my debate partner, Ricky, and let's get started. I find myself agreeing with the harms that my brother Dalton has brought up to this stage today, but I do not believe your grandmother's garden is going to solve them. Poverty, food insecurity, and racism are all caused by food apartheid. We do agree. However, we don't believe that illegal community farms will solve these problems. I'm gonna paint a picture for you. There are 44 million people in our country who are food insecure in America, and 13 million of those are children. According to the American Farms Bureau Federation, one farm in the US feeds 166 people annually. If we took the population of Los Angeles County, for instance, which is around 9 million people, and we see that 1 in 4 people in Los Angeles County are food impoverished, we'd say that you need 14,804 farms to feed Los Angeles County. Moreover, we see that the average farm is 445 acres, meaning what? Meaning that if we took those 14,804 farms, we would need over 7 million acres of land in order to feed these people. This is not going to work, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to happen. We see that when it comes to food apartheid and we see poverty and things of that nature, we can look at Atlanta and we can look at LA, we can look at Detroit, we can look at New York, and we can see that there is not enough green space in these places for these farms to happen. Moreover, I'd like to talk about racism. The affirmative would have the same individuals put themselves in more jeopardy with law enforcement by having them purposely break the law to solve a problem that they themselves did not make. There is no justice in response that causes more negative interactions with law enforcement, and we on this side of the house rebuke the idea that people of color and people of poverty should have to mend the wounds dealt to them by systematic oppression. In order for us to have a truly just response, we must topple the system that enables these systems to exist. What do I mean by that? I mean that we must invest in the infrastructure that we already have. We can see places in New York that have food trucking systems already here that ship millions and millions of pounds worth of food to food impoverished neighborhoods, such as the neighborhoods of Atlanta, such as the neighborhoods of New York, such as Detroit that I was just referring to. If we go down this path of illegal farming and we bring this to the people of, like I was naming before, it just simply will put us in more danger, right? Now, I live in the west end of Atlanta. That is where Morehouse College is. When we talk about farming like gangsters to guerrillas, which, by the way, is legal and sanctioned, right? We see that more and more black bodies and brown people will have to suffer for what? To mend a problem that they themselves did not put themselves in the first place. I had a great conversation with Dr. Reese the other day and people at the president's house. Excuse me. We talked about food apartheid and we talked about maybe some solutions to this problem. And we see that this has been going on since around the 60s. We see that mom and pop shops like grocery stores and drugstores were taken away from us. Why? This was done for a fact just so big business and corporations could make a quicker buck. We believe that, again, if we bring more resources back to where they should be, back to the communities in better ways that are not illegal by putting money and putting nonprofit organizations such as Greenpeace and things of that nature, in order so that we can feed ourselves and feed the communities that need it most, this will better us. Now, I apologize, give me 1 second. We see that BIPOC people at the same time, like I said, are the most policed people in America. And I'm going to cede the rest of my time. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? No. Can people hear me now? Okay, that sounds better. Okay, before I start my speech, I would like to thank Bates College for having us, for giving us the opportunity to debate this very important topic, to the president for hosting us last night, for giving an amazing keynote event this morning. I would like to thank everyone for coming, and I would like to thank our friends from Morehouse for having this fantastic debate with us. Why should there be hunger and deprivation in any land at any time when man has the resources and the scientific know-how to provide all mankind with the basic necessities for life? This comes from Martin Luther King from 50 years ago, and that is why this debate is still relevant today, because we still don't see the solvency for these issues. We still see people, millions of Americans every day, failing to bring food to the tables because of structural issues that we see today. Not everything that is just is what the law permits us to do. What is just, rather, can be what is morally required for us to do. The action is required to correct the historic wrongs that we see in this country today. Food deserts, food apartheid, has been studied and understood for many decades now, yet little to no legislation has followed. It is time to return the means of production back to those who need them most, to sustain themselves, their families, and their communities. This is why I'm incredibly proud to stand on side government for today's debate. Before I'm going to go deeper into the material, I would like to make two broad clarifications. First of all, this debate is a debate about solvency, not a debate about who can provide the best. It's a debate about justice. It is not about can we provide the perfect model in order to solve issues such as hunger. It is rather who can make any change. And I think if you just listen to Dalton's speech by himself, you will see that we're the side that actually provides any solvency. There's been claims that there's already food trucks in place, that there's means to provide people and communities with food. However, we can see that still there's been no changes made. The COVID pandemic has made these issues even worse. There's much more people in desolate places now than there have been 20 years ago. Despite the fact that these efforts have been in place, they're just not enough. We need to get to people the means of production back. We need to allow them to make their own food. We need to allow for them to take the means back in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to heal. Okay, a few things in my speech then. First, I will respond to some of the claims that have been coming from the opposition, tell you why actually they're not sufficient in order to engage with this debate, and I will also reiterate some of the points as to why only these illegal community farms are actually going to bring the solvency and the justice that is owed to these communities. The first thing that we hear from the opposition is the fact that, hey, these community farms are not actually going to be able to feed all the people that are currently suffering from food apartheid, from the lack of nutrition and so forth. The problem is, first of all, that they have not actually told us how they are going to feed all of those people. They've told us, hey, what if we bring in non-profit organizations? However, these efforts have already been in place, and they're obviously not sufficient in order to actually address these issues. Furthermore, I don't think we've ever been claiming that we can by ourselves feed everybody in this country who's currently lacking the ability to eat, the ability to feed their children and their families. However, I think the side of this debate that can provide some nutrition and some better food to these communities is the one that should win. It is ultimately a question of justice. Who can provide justice for these marginalized communities? And I think justice in this case is not what is legally correct. It is what helps these people, what permeates their ability to thrive. And I think that is ultimately going to fall on our side of the house. So I don't think we have to stand up and claim that these community farms are going to feed everybody, all of the 19.5 million people that currently live in food deserts. But I think if only 50% of these people, 25% of these people can have some additional food, can bring vegetables to their table and feed their children so that they can do well in school and fight these health risks that have been facing these populations for generations, I think that is clearly just a sign that these illegal community farms are going to be the way that we want to be going. The second thing then we hear is the fact that these populations are already in a place where they're being over-policed, where they are already forced into being jailed much more highly. We shouldn't put them in a place in which they are forced to commit more illegal acts. The problem here is a question of trade-off, right? Because on our side of the house, yes, there is some engagement in illegal activity of some sort. However, the question is, what is the first need that we want to provide for these people? It's probably true that your first concern is always to feed your family, to feed yourself, and you probably care less about whether you might go to jail. And also, I just don't think this is a fully fleshed out argument, because many of the reasons as to why these community communities are already over-policed is because people don't have access to the very basic needs that they have. They're already being pushed into illegal activities such as stealing or like theft in order to get the nutrition and to get like the materials that they need. We think the trade-off is actually very small, and we also don't think that the like implications are going to be as significant as they seem. We think that it's always going to be on our side of the house where there is more nutrition that we will actually take the debate. Also, I think just on the semantics of the resolution, the question is not, is it a good response or is it the best response that we could bring? It is a question of justice. It is a question of what is a just response to historic injustices. And the answer to historic injustice is probably not non-action. It is taking some form of action. It is returning the means of production to those who need them most. Okay, what else do we hear then? They say, hey, there are other solutions to bring supermarkets, to bring nutrition into these areas. However, there's significant structural reason as to why this is not going to happen, and they've been mostly ignored on side of proposition. There's a good reason why historically these areas are underserved, and they don't bring any solvency as to how we will serve them in the future. Some of these is, for example, that most of food deserts exist in places that just have like lower populations that are more low income. There's very little incentive for supermarkets to actually settle in these areas, for businesses to come in and feed the populations. As long as these like structural issues aren't fixed, we need our community farms in order to feed the people. And I don't think we can like solve these issues anytime soon without massive structural change. So as Dalton said, even if this is not a solution we want to engage in forever, it is a band-aid that we very direly need today. However, there's also systematic issues in place that just don't allow for supermarkets to settle in these areas. For example, there's much higher insurance costs for people, for like business to settle in these areas because of perceived crime that happens there. It is basically impossible for a supermarket to open and to get the revenue they need to run for longer than a year. And as long as these structural issues aren't fixed, as long as we don't have solvency, it is probably always going to be said government that is going to be claiming the better solvency, the better justice, and the better solutions. I think what you should take away from said government is a few things. First of all, the broad majority of people who live in these like places in which food is generally inaccessible have massive health issues that stem from this food insecurity. There's much higher rates of diabetes, there's much higher rates of like heart issues, there's much higher rates of obesity and all the issues that come from that. We cannot fix that if we leave people without the means to actually get healthy foods. And if we can't give them healthy foods, these communities are going to further like deteriorate, and like there's going to be no revitalization. I think we've provided you with several like ways of solving for these issues, with giving these communities a new way to engage with their own like betterment, to engage with their own struggles. We think this is very important because ultimately justice means giving like the means of production back to those who have been deprived of them for centuries, who have been deprived of the ability to be their own agents, of the ability to like live for themselves without depending on other people. We think giving this like ability to be yourself, to work for your own community, and to be an independent autonomous actor is the most important thing in this debate. If you vote for us, you vote for health and you vote for revitalized communities. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello. Before I start, thank you Morehouse for being here. Thanks to all the audience. And I'm a senior. Thanks to Bates for sending me to 82 debating tournaments in the past 4 years. I'm infinitely grateful for how I spent my college years here. Jonathan and I will win this debate by agreeing with most of the things you just heard. Is it better to have farms in order to solve for hunger? Yes. Is that the debate? No, because farms are legal on either side of the house. What they needed to defend is illegal farming, because moms and pops can still grow tomato in the backyard because supermarkets don't sell canned food, and because farmers who want to sell community products can still sell them in community markets. What is specifically different in this debate is about the illegal farming, but what proposition failed to agree with are the bigger, less community-friendly cases of community farming, are not the ones you go against direct supermarkets, but communities, for example, illegally planting rice in some areas, which sucks up other resources for other areas, because zoning law makes sense, and we need zoning laws in order to maintain a balance of resources. There's a reason why we have legal regulations over the type of agricultural products we need to have, and that is an independent question from the debate. It cannot just get away from talking about how part of a phenomenon is justified, doesn't make the entire phenomenon justified. Opposition will engage with the full picture. The more difficult bullet for you to bite. We're going to talk about the harms of illegal farming and how this breaks the agricultural livelihood of millions of farmers. This is the burden that side proposition needs to side with in this debate. 3 things in the speech. First, I'm going to expand the scope of this debate to talk about large-scale illegal farming in the global south. Second, I'm going to list out the negative consequences of illegal farming in this community. And thirdly, given these consequences, let's have a chat about justice. On the first thing, just on scope itself, right? I think there's a large scale of illegal farming that happens elsewhere other than the United States. And that is because in the United States, we do have these independent farms that do not get prosecuted in a vast majority of cases. But what is specifically different is that in a lot of places in this world, the type of farms that are illegal are the ones that are breaking production regulations, such as one, breaking zoning regulations, such as in Egypt, illegal community farms farming too much rice in one specific area, which leads to artificial droughts in other area because it takes a lot of water for you to farm rice. Or in other areas, for you to break agricultural regulations. For example, farming too much corn in Brazil because it takes a specific amount of nitrogen in order for corn to foster. Or to break environmental regulations. And that's the reason why these farms are considered illegal in the first place. It's because, yes, they increase output in the short term, but we care much more than output in the short term. One, we care about a fair distribution of these outputs so that other people who do not engage in this illegal behavior can still enjoy the output of their labor. But two, more importantly, we care about the sustainability of these outputs because if we kill the cow which produces the milk, then we do not have milk in the future. Because if we lead to unsustainable farming, then that only exacerbates a problem that side proposition wants to talk to you about. What is the implication of this argument? Very simply, in some cases of illegal farming, it's going to lead to justifiable results. In other cases, it won't. The world is not black and white, debate is not black and white. But what is balancing off here is that in a vast majority of cases that side proposition wants to talk to you about are the ones that can be done within legal boundaries. What they needed to specifically provide to you is what is specifically within the law that is blocking the type of progress they want to talk about, and that is a burden which neither speaker has fulfilled in this debate. And this is particularly important because the impact I just laid out to you about illegal farming in the global south actually matters because these are about the livelihood of farmers in which their lives depended upon it, in which millions of local food production depend upon it. And yes, this debate is MLK Day, but I think we need to care about just beyond the US, right? We need to care about the same egalitarian principles MLK taught to us about. And specifically on the second point, what are the negative consequences of illegal farming has on the community? One, I think it leads to an unfair distribution of resources, right? Because those are the ones who are able to afford to have bigger farms in the community outside of standard regulations are going to be the ones who squeeze other people out. Those who can afford bigger rice fields are going to be the ones who get greater irrigation canals. And that is the reason why we have fair amount of regulation required, that you only get your land of the share. And when you go beyond that, that is what makes it illegal. But two, doing things which increases production in the short run, but harms the environment in the long run. And what that leads to is that 20, 30 years down the line, when our children or when future generations come into the line, they do not have the sustainable food security that we are dependent upon. If you believe the status quo is bad as outlined by proposition, the future is only going to be worse. And specifically, what all of these tells you is that we need to care about the least well off, right? Because one, they don't have the additional resources. Because the ones who are able to constantly afford to break the law and get away from it are the ones who are going to be the most socially disadvantaged positions. But also, the ones who are going to be directly harmed by the social inequity are going to be the ones we care about in this debate, are the very same actors that government talks to you about. But lastly, let's have an abstract chat about justice, because I'm a philosophy student. First thing to talk about is that the people who are affected with these negative externalities cannot just be traded off, right? Because they were not the cause. It is only a morally arbitrary position that you are the ones getting harmed by this illegal farming. Even if side proposition wins, that there is a problem in the status quo, and somehow they win, that this is a magical solution, justice shouldn't be a game of just measuring skill. The end we set and pursue should be universalizable. It means if I do not want something bad happening to me, I should not have that something bad happening to someone else. If moral principles are not universalizable, then trade-off is individual issue in morally arbitrary scenarios and fail to ground action. It means that some people are more morally advantageous than others, that you're more morally worthy than others. And I think that is just entirely counterintuitive. But two, even if you think people should be allowed to do this as a response, they should be allowed to break the law, which by the way didn't give you reasons why we needed to, at the expense of harming others, at best, this makes illegal community farming permissible. There's a difference between a just act and a permissible act. If you point a gun at me and ask me in order to steal bread, my action is permissible because I was under duress, but I wouldn't call my action just because it directly harms the livelihood of another person. And specifically, I think there's some degree of moral preferability that comes from it. But lastly, just moral skepticism. I think you should always err on the side of caution for justice. A vote for proposition in this debate doesn't mean we'll label these acts as unjust. The negation of the motion simply requires you to not believe that this is a just response. What should we do? I have no idea. It's a very complicated issue, but I think we should err on the side of caution for justice, because the reason why we care about justice is precisely because of its overall high bar, that we cannot just trade off justice with the livelihood of other people. And in the cases that we aren't sure, we do not know, and we do not have the lived experiences, we cannot just tag things as justified. We must be epistemically humble.
All right. Well, while we're waiting I'm putting on a timer for 10 minutes. Please collect your thoughts. Think about what kinds of questions you want to ask our debaters. And then we have our lovely microphone holders, Trinity and Ari, who are ready to come to you after I acknowledge you. Okay, so who has questions? Please raise your hand high. I'm right here, right in the middle.
Hi. Okay, so I had two questions, one for the opposition, one for the support. I can start off with the support for now. How would the legalization of illegal farms work for people suffering by the food apartheid in larger cities? The opposition brought up the point that food trucks in New York City are at least alleviating the suffering of those in larger cities. The support shot this down by saying just shot down the opposition's point of food trucks in certain cities by saying that it doesn't target the whole of cities. How would illegal farms work in cities that have limited farm space, that tend to have more low-income communities, and thus a stronger requirement to fix the food apartheid wholly? Should I say the opposition as well, or?
No.
Okay.
Affirmative.
Okay, I think it's very important to understand that we're not actually against things like food trucks. We just don't think that in the last decades we didn't see that these are sufficient responses in order to actually target these issues, right? We still see a food apartheid, we still see food deserts in these areas where food truck exists. And what we say is that we need to supplement these models with other things, where the community can take the power back by themselves, grow their own foods. And we acknowledge this is probably not going to be working 100%. We told you that we don't think it's feasible for us to feed everyone, but we think if we can feed some more people, that is always going to be a good response to these food deserts in order to supplement these already existing programs that are obviously not sufficient.
Awesome, thank you so much. And for the opposition, I had a different question. Without a doubt, the stigmatization of foods labeled as organic versus processed foods, or even foods that aren't labeled as organic, are price gouged and thus made inaccessible to certain consumers. I know that on the sports side, debater Dalton brought up the statistic that there are 3 times more liquor stores in low-income communities than supermarkets. Does this difference in the type of supermarket and thus the type of food available in these communities not further push the food apartheid evident, and thus the requirement for legalization of illegal farms?
Right. I think that the disparity between organic foods and its access for it is a problem. The problem is that it's unclear whether or not the law is the one that is preventing this from happening for equality. I think it is likely that, we get through this by other means. And I still think it is important for us to hold up legal standards, even if we want to sell organic food. On either side, if you're a farmer who's trying to sell organic food, you can still go to farmer market, right? That's not illegal. What specifically needs to happen is to identify what the law is obstructing and what illegal action is needed.
Alicia right in the front.
Hi, my name is Alicia. I have a question for both sides of the debate. So if there are food trucks on side opposition and community gardens inside government, wouldn't this at best case be a wash? And if not, how are each of these accomplishing their mission of providing better food access on each side?
Sure. So we see with illegal food gardens, right, in my opinion, that I stated before in the debate that there's just a huge scaling issue with them, that there's no way in the world that these food gardens can feed everybody that needs to be fed. And a side affirmative says even if we feed 25% of the people, it's still a go. I say on this side of the house that we have food trucks that can go cross-continental, that can go across the entire country and feed the people. So we say that, with refrigeration, we can do things like meat, we can do things like different types of foods that need refrigeration, and also, things of that nature can travel across the country and get to those people. And we see that, it can also come to people in rural areas that are food impoverished, urban areas that are food impoverished, and things of that nature. On their side of the house, again, they're just saying if we grow a garden, multiple gardens, we'll be able to feed the people. We say on this side of the house that the trucks and things of that nature, if we give more money to systems like that is a better model than theirs.
We say on the side of the house that autonomy is absolutely vital to the discussion that we're having today. Not only are we having discussions about, what the negative would say is that we should allow for food trucks sponsored by NGOs to come to communities. However, what we're saying on the affirmative side of the house is that sure, those are great to have. However, clearly they're not solving the issue well enough. And when we have two issues that do not solve the issue well enough, what we need to look at is what the benefits are. We say very clearly the benefits to having communal gardens are that we are seeing ready access to having fresh access to food, as well as community mobilization, which we think can also be used for political aims. Absolutely, it is the case that having something that is from the community, by the community, and for the community is much more helpful than outside people coming in that you may not trust in the first place.
Dr. Nero, down here in the front.
This is a question for the second speaker in opposition. Could you just clarify for me just real quickly your statement about justice? You said something about, we should not be quick because we may not actually pursue justice. Are you saying something like justice is something that can wait?
So the claim isn't that justice is something we can wait, right? The claim is that we are often not in a position to know whether or not something is justified. In fact, I have no idea what justice is, right? And I think most people would disagree with each other on what justice is. And on a very complicated issue like this, in which there are good reasons why some illegal farms help the community, there are also really good reasons about why some illegal farms create droughts, because people aren't following their moral consciousness. In these cases, where we do not know, I think it is dangerous to label something as justice, because we do not inspect into it in the same way we would for other issues. We do not put them under the microscope like we would with other ordinary issues. And I think that is a needed process before we can call something as just.
Back here, all the way at the top.
Okay, so for the government side, you might be going to do this in your other 5 minutes, but I would love if you guys could clarify your definition of justice, because the idea of something being permissible versus just was very compelling to me, and I was curious what your response to that would be, given that there are parts of your proposition that very easily could not be construed as just, given that they might cause harm.
So throughout our case, and I apologize for not getting to this before, but we use retributive justice as key to our model. When you have aggression against you, when you have systemic harms against you, you must do what is necessary in order to, keep living. So we find that very important to our case, and retributive justice is a form of justice that is very legitimate when you are facing systemic and existential harms.
Great. Can I ask one for the opposition really quickly? Okay. I think my name is Lee, by the way. I think the thing that has sort of stuck with me most is the fact that obviously you're arguing for these potential alternatives, but right now none of those alternatives are specifically available and being pursued. And so I was wondering if you could just speak to the idea that why is this not just if it is the only option, because you don't know that those other options are going to be pursued. I don't know if that makes sense. It's okay if it doesn't.
Sure, yeah, it makes sense. So I would say that in my, I believe it was my second argument about, again, putting BIPOC people in double jeopardy, I say that we look at this as a huge problem, to me at least, because I've seen what it looks like to, be food impoverished. I've seen what that effect has on people morally. I've seen what police brutality can do to African Americans and people of color. And putting somebody in double jeopardy in that situation is not justice at all. The second speaker says that we're willing to deal with trade-offs. I don't believe in that at all. I don't believe that this is a valid trade-off at all, especially when we have mechanisms in the status quo right now that if we put money into, that could solve this problem already. We don't need to be putting people of color in double jeopardy and having them risk their lives to fix a problem that they themselves did not make and that was done unto them.
Great. Thank you guys so much.
And then for our last question, we're going to go right here.
Thank you. I have a question for the second speaker of the opposition. You spoke and distinguished between the illegal farms that we're discussing in the United States of America, and then you distinguished between those farms and illegal farms internationally. And when you spoke about farms internationally, you specifically spoke about causing droughts and the use of illegal farming by potentially more privileged people or people in a position of power to escape legal consequences and that irresponsibility. But then later in your talk about justice, you discussed how the illegal farms in the US may incur harm upon the people doing the farming that it's supposed to help. And I was wondering if you could clarify the claim of whether or not illegal farms are supposed to be more harmful to the people they're supposed to restore through justice, or people that are already in power, marginalizing these communities.
So I think there are illegal farms that does good and illegal harm that does, bad things, right? And the debate answer is, I think it does more harm. The honest answer is, I don't think I'm in a position to know responsibly, because even if we're able to accurately assess whether it does more harm than good now, it's unclear how this projection is going to be the next 20, 30 years. Given the society we're changing in, climate change, all the massive amount of uncertainty in our society that we cannot foresee. Then I think it is best for us to be grounded in some sort of a framework, either legal or even social framework in which we have some say and some responsibility into what sort of action is or is not permissible. And I think just operating off the charts, in some cases, may lead to great results, right? There are going to be people who do wonderful, wonderful things with illegal, unregistered farming. But I think on a wide societal scale, that is a cause of concern, considering the perverse incentive some individuals may have. So I'm not sure if it answers your question. I don't know. And I guess that's a reason why we shouldn't call it just, because we don't know.
All right, thank you so much for those fabulous questions. So now I invite the affirmative team to give a rebuttal speech for no longer than 5 minutes. Hear, hear.
Many thanks, everyone, once again. As it is my last time to speak once again, I know you've heard many thank yous, but we just want to share those thank yous because we are truly appreciative of the opportunity we've been provided. I'm going to be starting my time now. In a system of injustice, you must find your own justice. That is what the affirmative side is telling you in today's debate. We hear a lot from the negative side that, in a case in which you are unsure, maybe you should stay doing what you're doing. However, what we tell you is that justice delayed is justice that is denied. What we tell you is that when you are living in a food desert, what you must do is eat. And you must eat in any way that you can find possible. We give you a comprehensive case in today's debate, giving you two substantial reasons, I'm sorry, I couldn't get to the third, as to why community gardens are a preferable model and one that provides you adequate justice. In regard, what the negative tells you in today's debate is that if you're hungry, maybe you should starve. We tell you that is absolutely not the case, and for that reason, we give you three substantial reasons why the affirmative wins today's debate. The first is our understanding of justice. Once again, we give you substantial benefits. We tell you that in the case in which there are food deserts, and we say this is probably not just in the United States, but also elsewhere as well, we say that there are substantial benefits being the access to healthy food and the decreasing of the systemic existential harms that we face in the status quo. However, and we also tell you that community farms give you access to autonomy. They give you access to community organizing. They give you access to community vitalization. What the negative wants to tell you is that these benefits are not tangible. However, what the affirmative side provides you is tangible research. We cite our sources. We see nothing of that sort on the negative side of the house. We should also talk about the discussion of permissibility. We say in the question and answer that the type of justice that we use is retributive justice. When you face a harm, you have to do whatever is necessary to have that harm go away, to have that be solved. That is what you are being provided in the affirmative side of today's case. What the negative tells you is that you should wait for others to do something for you. We tell you that when you have harms here and now, you can do something here and now. Finally, we talk about, in today's argument, the idea of universality. I think that this comes out in the last part of today's debate because there is nothing substantial to really hold to it. We see some choice examples, cases in just two examples, nothing provided by substantial research. We see no discussion of harms on the negative side of today's debate. However, once again, what we tell you on the affirmative side of today's debate is that when you do not have justice, you must take your own. And what the negative tells you is that kind of these abstract examples that are not truly community gardens because they are not redistributing that produce back to the community. So for those reasons, we see that the affirmative is actually topical in today's debate, and we are providing you substantial reasons. The negative is sadly not doing that. Finally, our second point here is that justice denied is justice delayed is justice denied. I see my coach laughing there. Anyways, what we say once again is that when you face a harm, you must solve that harm, and that is truly what you see on the affirmative side of today's debate. And we are actually upholding the topic. We are actually providing you justice. We do not see that on the negative side of today's debate. Finally, we must talk about autonomy, something that really came forward in today's debate. When we are having a discussion of what justice looks like, we have to actually ask the question about who our stakeholders are. And our stakeholders today are the people that we noted, the 1/6 of the American population that does not have ready access and easy access to healthy foods. What we tell you in today's debate is that for that 1/6 of the American population, they can do something. If they already have access to community gardens, they should continue to use them. It is just to continue to use them. They should not be shut down when they are providing a actual, tangible benefit. What the negative side of today's debate tells you is that if you already have a community garden, one that provides you actual benefits and provides the community a help and a resource, that should be shut down. They are going to deny actual benefits to people because they are unsure of what needs to be done. What we tell you on the affirmative side is we know what needs to be done. We have an understanding of the harms, and we have an understanding of how they can be fixed. And with that, we must affirm today's resolution. I thank you for your time.
Okay, that first one's a little rough, so let's see if we can give you guys something better. Again, I'd like to give another round of thanks to Bates College. Like I said, I've really had a lot of fun. Again, round of thanks to my partners and the other debaters. Again, it's been a lot of fun, and let's get this started. If you notice something, my brother Dalton talked about the examples he said and how these examples work. And they're right, they do work. Like, for instance, Gangsta Grills that is in Atlanta. It does work. And the reason it works is because it's a legal farm and it's a legal garden in Atlanta. There are no examples of illegal farming that my brother has given that actually work. Moreover, I'd like to say that there is no justice in incarceration and there is no justice in inaction. Let's talk about inaction. First off, I've given you a lot of statistics that show that the size of these farms that he's talking about just is not feasible to feed all the people. We even have Tosca over here that states that, well, you know, if we can't feed everybody, then we'll aim for a sure 25%. Why should we aim for 25% when we have mechanisms in the status quo right now, if we give money and we revamp them, that can get us to 100%? If we revamp things like WIC, if we revamp things like food stamps, if we revamp things like nonprofit organizations and trucking organizations that I was talking about and give money to those, and these can come from grassroots organization in communities, why not do that in the legal bounds of the world and not have people suffer from illegal actions? These are things that can be done and that the affirmative does not contend with at all. Moreover, let's talk about incarceration. I've seen what this looks like. I've seen like I said, I've seen what a food apartheid looks like. I've seen what poverty can look like, and I've seen what police brutality can look like. Why would we put Black people and BIPOC people in double jeopardy and have them harm themselves to fix a problem they themselves did not create? It makes zero sense. There is no justice in that. Moreover, my brother Dalton wants to talk about autonomy and how doing these things and revamping the community through community gardens will give the people more autonomy. I say there is no autonomy if you are locked up in a jail cell. There is no autonomy if, again, you're sitting here with police officers kneeling on your neck because you wanted to feed yourself. There is no autonomy in that at all. The affirmative wants you to believe that planting a garden in your backyard and having everyone come over to your house to cook will feed your people and will solve a problem. We on this side of the house say that that's simply not true and that there are no examples that he has given you that will prove that fact. We on this side of the house say that we need to revamp what we have in the legal bounds in order to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending this event. Thank you so much for Morehouse for coming all the way out here to do this activity that we love. Please do not forget to vote for who you think won the debate. The QR codes are posted around the room. And have a fabulous evening. Take care. Thank you so much.